1961, a wall was built out of cement and steel that would create a barrier between communist and democratic governments for the next 4 decades.
It was known as the Berlin Wall because it split the city of Berlin into two distinct physical and political worlds.
East Germany built the barrier in order to keep Western travelers and democratic ideas from getting in, and to keep East Berliners from getting out.
Then, in an historic moment in 1989, the Berlin Wall came down. What was revealed after the dust cleared were two very different communities. While the West had prospered and created a modern city, the East was struggling with old world traditions and a lagging economy.
In this next CNN story, you'll get a glimpse of the challenges facing Germany as it attempts to bring these two worlds together and create a unified country.
The Iron Curtain blinded East Germans to how far they were behind. As it came down, we watched Easterners getting a taste of their rich Western cousins.
Und das andere erst gestaffelt. Die Bundesbürger.
They'll come over here and buy our houses, and we'll just have to wipe our noses and pay rent on what we built ourselves.
I think we must accept it because we are the weaker ones.
This is Sicheri in Western Germany today, saved from 4 decades of communism by the width of a creek. That's Buchwitz, a few yards away, across what used to be a wall. And here's what we saw and reported here 8.5 years ago. Sicheri then, where the gardens and the people have that sleek, well-cared-for look that comes with making a habit of prosperity. While the Buchwitzers look pretty much the way they've always looked, the way both sides used to look when their lives were entwined. To hear Walter Hartmann tell it, before the wall, Sicheri was just a suburb of Buchwitz.
Die Molkerei war hier, die Bäckerei war hier.
Dairy, carpenter, blacksmith, everything was over here, he says. But for the last 40 years, the wall was the only thing that got developed on this side. Buchwitz became part of East Germany's expendable buffer zone, the wrong side of the tracks. The hottest thing in Buchwitz today is Willy Schuta's Museum of the Wall.
Die andere Straße ging hier durch.
The mood's not great, he says. Some people wish the wall was still up. First the wall, now the West. History has killed Buchwitz. Unification killed antiquated, overstaffed Eastern industries. 1 out of 5 workers now out of a job, twice as bad as in the West, blaming it all on Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Neo-Nazis rage in the East, and wages are low. And ex-communists, now democratic socialists, might win more votes than the Chancellor Easterners once hailed as a hero. The flourishing landscape Mr. Kohl promised is taking shape. Slowly. New ways are being learned. But today's Easterners don't compare themselves to the old communist bloc. They look to the West and see it still far ahead. Eastern cabinet ministers will be scarce, however Sunday's voting goes, as are Eastern board chairmen, generals, judges, anything at the top in united Germany.
Mir ist zum Beispiel aufgefallen, dass
The West doesn't see us as equals, but as people who have to be taken in hand. He's right. Taxpayers in Western Germany have forked out $500 billion to revamp the East, and some are impatient. Sometime it has to stop. We can't do everything. They should try to take care of themselves. Whoever thinks communism left Eastern Germans shiftless, helpless, and hopeless should talk to Arthur Jentsch. In a fit of nostalgia, he mounted an old East German Trabi by his barn. City fathers told him, "Take that eyesore down." Then the storks came, one endangered species on top of another. It's against the law to tamper with a stork's nest. There's a lesson there somewhere. Richard Blystone, CNN Neuruppin, Eastern Germany.
Obviously, Germany's problems won't be solved in a day. Years of conflict between the East and West don't just disappear because a wall is torn down and borders are erased. The emotional and intellectual barriers between the two communities will take longer to tear down.
In this next CNN story, you'll meet another divided community, Belfast in Northern Ireland. In Belfast, religious differences have sparked years of unrest and violence.
In what is known as the Troubles, the minority Irish Catholic community and the Protestant majority often clash, many times with deadly consequences.
For For decades, British troops have tried to keep the peace. As you will see, the wall in this city is as much psychological as physical.
The government built the so-called peace walls to withstand even peace, walling antagonists into separate pens where theoretically they can't get at each other. Whatever the politicians decide, these are the people who will have the final say.
Just because they go ahead, get something down on paper, agree to something.
And hope.
And hope for the best.
Imagine living like this, edgy as the soldiers that patrol your streets. A life full of walls and fences and barriers and landmarks that define who you are, where you're welcome and where you're not. The buildings show their damage unashamed. The wreckage within the survivors of 3,000 dead is harder to spot.
It's meant heartache. That's what it's meant. Heartache on both sides.
When terror and tension are daily routine, says psychologist Ed Cairns.
For some people, it's had a dreadful impact. Some people are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and so on. Children have seen their fathers murdered, all sorts of terrible things like that. But for most people, it's been a constant source of mild anxiety in quite a remarkable way. People have got used to what is going on. And unless something out of the ordinary happens, people have really dealt with it remarkably well.
Between now and 1 o'clock, it's D for Decision Day, and Mo Mowlam is upbeat.
Talkback Radio takes the public temperature.
Because I'm deeply concerned that, no matter what is in this document, there are elements out there who haven't even seen it, but would condemn it anyway.
Dr. Blair of Glenarm is worried about the political climate, what it will do for people's sanity.
What about Ireland?
Foreign country dealing or legislating rather for a different country.
I suppose the problem...
I'm very, very pessimistic about the outcome of this.
For all the trouble between groups, between people, there's remarkable civility here.
If you sit beside someone on a bus, and they may or may not be from the other side, but just in case you talk about the weather or the latest sports results, you don't mention politics or religion, and that way people get on relatively well.
Relatively well, as long as they avoid the issues. But that's not compromise. Whether it's a role for the Irish Republic...
We should definitely have a say in our own affairs, without any outside interference.
Or fears of staying British.
It's very, very depressing, really, at the minute, because, everybody wants peace. But at the end of the day, you just don't want peace at any price.
They're as reluctant on the streets as at the table.
There's a lot of wee children in a room and said, settle this, and you have to have a party after it. That would have been settled long ago.
At best, for the heirs of segregation, of terrorist killings and paramilitary beatings, it will take a long time.
We still have a situation where children or Protestant and Catholics are educated apart. They work apart, and they're even buried apart.
Peace could be traumatic, and it might be that then people will look back and will say to themselves, hey, did that really happen to me? Did I really live through that? And then for the first time, they'll really need professional help.
Everybody's endured. Everybody has endured. Everybody's went through the mill. Everybody's went through the whole thing. I mean, Catholic, Protestant, and I think we're all the same. At the end of the day, we are all the same.
Negotiators from both sides of the fence know very well that it is not themselves, but their children or their children's children who will see the real fruits of their labor. Richard Blystone, CNN Belfast.
The situations in Germany and Northern Ireland are very different, yet both will need leaders who can influence their community to set aside long-standing differences.
Until these barriers within are opened, tearing down walls of stone and steel will not create a lasting peace.